Have you ever heard of the zombie outbreak that took place in August of 1986 on the island of Okinawa, Japan during Typhoon Vera? No? Well, you're lucky, okay? And I'm going to tell you about it today. And the reason I'm going to tell you is I believe I'm the last original member of a unit that was formed after this day, after this occurrence. And, I'm dealing with my own sickness of the Marine Corps, and who knows how long I'll be here. I could be disappeared. I could be deleted. I could die of natural causes. Who knows what could happen? But I'm going to tell you these tales, and whether you believe them or not is up to you. But if you've paid attention around the world the last 30 years from reports from our military about what I can only call monsters, you might want to listen to this so-called zombie story. Okay, and it was I was still a member of 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines. We had deployed to Okinawa as part of regular deployment rotations. We were based out of Hawaii at the time, but this was taking place during the typhoon when most of the Camp Hansen was basically empty because everyone was out training, and my 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines was mostly in the Philippines at that time, and I'd been left behind with a few people basically to take care of our section of the base, and monitor that and take care of the armory, etc. Okay, so buckle up, strap in, grab some popcorn and a beer, and stand by for one of the craziest tales you're ever going to hear about real live monsters. As I said, I was in 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines, and at the time I was part of headquarters platoon and acting as the company armorer and sometimes scout and sometimes even the vehicle driver for like the CO, first sergeant, etc. It seemed like we were always short bodies back in those days. So I was a 19-year-old corporal who was a 4th-generation Marine and with plans to be a lifer. I was raised on, Marine Corps tales of danger and adventure. And at this point, I'd been meritoriously promoted, 3 times, and I was a believer in the Corps, right to the bone. But what was about to happen was going to change my plans, eventually. So to start getting to the point, I'll remind you that it was August 25th, 1986. It's almost 40 years ago. And although sometimes I think it was the 26th, but I might be confusing the date line, etc., as my memory, continues to get worse by the month, it seems. It wasn't like I was keeping a diary back then. So Typhoon Vera was the biggest typhoon since, I think, 1969 to hit Okinawa, and it had 100-plus mile winds at its peak with gusts much higher. And it was strange timing because Camp Hansen was mostly empty with 1-3 and all the support groups training in the Philippines at the time. I think there was also some ongoing coup problems. I mean, from 85, 86, and 87, the Philippines was just about to fly apart. So there was a constant presence there, if you know what I mean. So the base was already on skeleton staff because, like I said, Camp Hansen was not a big permanent base. It was a lot of deployed units, and of course it has permanent staff there that serve a year to a year and a half type of thing. But with the typhoon coming, a lot of people had evacuated down to Camp Foster, which had better structure, bunkers, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so anyway, it's now dark, and I'm up in the Alpha Company headquarters building, which was basically where our offices were, but it was also served. There was a rec room, with TV, radio, games like ping pong, etc., plus food machines, and it's on a rise, so that in theory was going to be the last building to start flooding from our barracks thing, where they section it off. So it was in there. There was 5 Marines with me, and they weren't all Alpha Company actually. So 2 were. I don't know where we had a few more people from the company around, but they were hunkered down elsewhere. And so 2 of the ones from Alpha Company, one was a good friend of mine, and then there was another Lance Corporal named Ring. But the others were, another one was the armorer from Charlie Company, who was also a good friend of mine, and there was a scout from State Platoon from headquarters that I'd gone to sniper school with in Hawaii. Not the big giant one in Quantico that's longer, the advanced one, which I was hoping to go to back then at that time. But and then the last guy was just some random Marine that was assigned to the Camp Hansen motor pool, who I think got stuck behind by himself, and he didn't want to be by himself, so he had asked if he could hang out with us, which, we said was cool, and then, if I remember correctly, it was around like 10 p.m. when a lieutenant from H&S, Headquarters and Support Company, part of 1-3, came into the rec room and, asking who was in charge. And my friend Joe says, aren't you? Because this LT, he was the ranking officer left behind for 1-3 while the battalion was, temporarily in the Philippines and stuff. And we hadn't seen this MFer in the last 2 weeks. So I don't know if he was out in Kenville getting drunk or down at Kadena living it up at the big Air Force Officers Club, but we had not seen his ass one time. So since we're in the Alpha Command building, basically, I say I'm in charge. And it was true, for as far as that goes. He starts asking me how much ammo and what type we have in our armory, and I look over at my friend Pete, the armorer from Charlie Company, before saying, really, not much. I mean, we probably got around 300 rounds of 5.56 and 40 of 45 cal. And the 45 cal rounds were really for like my sidearm as the armorer and my assistant, thing. So it's only a few magazines each. Pete chimed in that Charlie roughly had, about the same. And, again, it's just for basically for guarding the armory when the armories are open, because after they're secured, there's an outside perimeter, and it's not us that has to guard that part. Feel bad for anyone actually having to be outside or near their post that night. So anyway, it doesn't matter. Point is, we didn't have much. So the lieutenant, whose real name I forget at this point because I only saw him one other time after this night, maybe twice or something, because he was transferred and stuff, was that he starts telling us that an OMA being a beat cop, an Okinawan beat cop, what's it called? Omawara-san. Okay, we just call them OMAs for short because it's a mouthful. And he had shown up at the front gate asking for help, claiming some fishermen had gone crazy and attacked other fishermen, and there was a cop dead along with a fisherman. And they had the fishermen contained, but they needed some muscle to secure them, okay? And the base MPs for Hansen were already stretched in, had their hands full because there was all sorts of chaos going around with the Typhoon. I mean, basically the Typhoon was turning the whole island into a giant goat screw, and we were in the middle of it. And so, it figures that some crap like this would go down on such a night, of course. But the village of Ken, didn't have that many cops to begin with, and, half the town was already out of power, and those cops really only carried like 38 sidearms and like the Tonfa, and some of them didn't even carry sidearms and stuff like that. So I'm thinking myself that this is nuts, and I look around and I see excitement in everyone's face, but Morgan, and that's the scout sniper from H&S. He just looks at me like, well, this is life, and the big green suck, and screw it. Pretty sure that we were the two smartest guys in the room, because I didn't think this was going to be fun at all. So I tell the LT that Pete and I have keys to our armories, of course, and so we can get weapons, etc. And the LT realizes we need a vehicle as well, and he looks a little bewildered. And I'm like, well, this guy with the motor pool, I'm sure he can conjure up a vehicle. So I also asked the LT if we need flax and helmets, or if we just need our freaking harnesses, and weapons. And he says flax and helmets. And inwardly, I'm like, are you serious? Groaning and stuff. But little did I know that helmet was going to save my life later. So anyway, I'm thinking to myself, going over the things, listening to this wind that's still picking up outside. And it's bad. And I'm thinking this is the last place I want to be. But anyway, unfortunately, I forget the motor pool guy's name because I literally never saw him again after this night, and it's not like I was writing it down. But the LT tells him to go get an armored Humvee transport, and not the kind with the 50 cal mounts on top, etc., but basically just armored, and you can fit X amount of people in, a little less than the flat top ones and stuff back in the day, but still enough for what we were doing. We're basically going out with 7 guys or so, and so there was plenty of room, enough room for that. So everyone runs off to get their gear, and the LT told us to get to the armory as fast as we could, which wasn't far. It was probably only like, I don't know, 200 yards from our actual barracks, where Alpha was like sort of lead in the way the companies were staggered out with their buildings and stuff. So, within 10 minutes, basically, we were all at the armory, including the motor pool guys driving up with the Humvee. So Pete and I give everyone 16s except the LT, and we can't get into the H&S Armory, and I have no idea who or where had the keys to that to get his actual issued sidearm. So, it never occurred to me to ask the LT where the hell all the H&S guys were, because there was not one around except for for Morgan. Okay. And I didn't even remember to ask him. I don't know. It's just one of those things. And maybe I did know at the time, but it's 40 years later. So anyway, I give the LT a 45, and everyone else gets 16s. And I decided I'm taking my 45 too. And I know Pete grabbed his. So I was like, yeah, well, whatever. We'll see what happens. And ammo-wise, we only each took 2 magazines. And so that's around 60 rounds. And I had 3 45 caliber mags for the pistol, and we pile into the actually thinking back, really we had a little bit more ammo, but we didn't take it, and that could have been a fatal decision based on what was going to happen later. But at the time, I didn't know. We're expecting to arrest people or help arrest people and not get into a firefight. So we pile into that armored coffin and we head toward the front gate as fast as safely possible. With the motor pool guy driving. And we stop at the front gate, and we're surprised. Well, I'm surprised. The guys, I don't know if the LT actually knew at the time or not, to see the kin cop waiting for us, the OMA. Okay, and so like I said, I guess the LT knew he's waiting, but we didn't. He squeezed in, and we headed out the gate. The wind and rain are hitting like hell right now, and I'm thinking this is gonna suck, and we're probably all gonna drown. And because we're headed to the fishing port down at the coast where the ocean's coming in and stuff like that. The cop speaks pretty good English and praised the universe, because no one with us spoke any more than 10 phrases of Japanese, if that. And a lot of that probably had to do with ordering food or simple commands of stop, go, whatever, hands up. I knew how to thank people and how to thank my laundress from my laundry, but no one was fluent in Japanese that was with us. So we leave the gates and we're swinging a right, after leaving Hanson, and start skirting Kinville. Okay. And we find out that we're headed down near Red Beach and the what was it called, the Hamada fishing port. Okay, and it's near where there's a giant power plant sits today, the Kin thermal power plant or something. And back in '86, it was just a small power station. And right away, though, we can see like half the town is out of power or more, and the other half is flickering off and on. Crap is getting creepy really fast. The wind is howling, and I'm kind of reminded of the Japanese wind spirit, myths and stuff like that, which is not helping my mood at all. So now, what the OMA is telling us is not helping my mood either. Okay, the story he's telling is this. So some fishermen a couple days before had dragged up out of the ocean, what they thought was a safe. It was metal, black, rectangular, but it had a weird circular turn handle at the top, and instead of like a normal safe face or something like that, so it basically, I guess it's like a hatch like you would see on top of a submarine or ship's doors, etc., that type of thing. So they brought it into their freeze locker or cold locker, where you store fish, etc., after for processing. And they started trying to get the rust off, the opening thing, so that they could open it. Okay, and for some reason they thought that it was a good plan to open it during a typhoon, or maybe that's just when it worked out that it was getting loose enough that they could do it. And also with no one around, maybe they're thinking they don't have to share or whatever. So who knows why? They just didn't want other people to see them strike it rich when they opened up the safe and found the imaginary gold bars or whatever they thought was going to be in there. So anyway, whatever they did to loosen it over those days worked. And basically when they opened it, a green cloud of something, popped out and, hitting 2 of them in the face. And one of the others that was thinking quickly, slammed the lid shut and stuff. And according to the cop, from what the two, the other fishermen had told him, was the two guys who got the cloud in the face immediately started seizing and collapsed. Okay, the two others ran out, shutting the locker door, and ran for the cop station in the south part of the town. Now, I can't tell you why they're, leaving their guys behind or whatever, or maybe they're thinking they're dead already, or maybe they're like, well, those guys, we have to sacrifice them to keep the town from, who knows? But whatever reason, somebody had shut it, and they were exiting the building, and they went to look for to find a cop or something like that, to get a medic, etc. And things are not going to be moving out there. It's not like you can just get on the phone and call an ambulance, etc. It's no one had, it's 1986. There's no cell phones and things of that nature. So the other, they ran out, they shut the door, and they ran for the cop station in the south part of Kenville. So I don't know if they drove back with the cops or if they ran back, etc. But they went back with two cops and a medic, and they opened the locker, and they went in expecting to see two guys on the ground. Instead, the two fishermen were up, just standing there like they were drugged or something, swaying. And according to the OMA, they immediately set on one of the cops and one of the fishermen, growling and yelling or roaring or something like that. Something might have been, lost in translation, but supposedly one of the fishermen just bit right into the jugular of the cop and started, was clawing at his face, etc. And one of the other fishermen tackled another fisherman to the ground, tearing and biting at his face and neck or something like that. According to the others, according to the OMA, the others tried to get them off, but the drug guys just were too strong. If you think about PCP, other things where you get superhuman drug-fueled strength, etc. That's what was going down supposedly. Very quickly, basically, the fishermen and the down cop were dead, and the remaining three rescuers, so to speak, fled in a panic and managed to lock the maniacs in the cold locker, and they were supposedly still there. So I remember looking around the Humvee, and it was hard to see faces and stuff, but I could see Joe mouth, basically BS. And our motor pool guy, though, he's muttering about, what the heck, what the heck, what the heck, over and over like it's a prayer or something. And the LT's not talking much and really wasn't giving any orders or anything yet, but I figured he was just wanted to get there and see what was up. Again, we're supposed to be muscle for this. Just in case, though, I told everyone to check their mags and tighten their gear. And the wind seemed to be dropping a little bit, which I was grateful for. The rain wouldn't matter as much as long as we could reach there easily, because we'd be entering a building eventually. And the way the docks and stuff are, there's walkways with roofs, and there's shelter because of stalls. And anyway, it wouldn't be as big a problem. We're not going to be outside. So, again, like the fish stalls, there's cover in front of them and all that stuff. So, but the wind could really trip us up bad as we get near there, because there's a lot of wooden structures too. And I'm just thinking more than anything, so I'm not worried about druggies. I'm worried about drowning and being swept out to sea or whatever. And I just didn't want to go out the way. A Marine may be, mean soldier of the sea, but screw that. So, we rolled up as close as we could and to our objective, following the OMA's guidance. Okay. I remember we exited the video, and still the LT hadn't said much at all. And so I said, line of departure, lock and load, safety's on. And I looked at the LT, and he didn't say anything. He just gave me a thumbs up or something. So, and I think really at this point, I'm not sure what everyone was thinking. It's 40 years ago. But again, I'm still thinking about the typhoon danger and not what's about to come. The next 10 minutes would be the weirdest, most surreal, and unbelievable time of my short life so far. And if I hadn't been in weirder events later, I don't think I'd believe what went down. I would have chalked it up to a bad trip or a psychotic episode. Instead, in the middle of the roughest typhoon to hit Oki in 25 years plus, I was entering the twilight zone. And as we started to follow the OMA down a wooden walkway, that headed down to the dock and fish stalls, that LT, he pulls me aside and tells me he wants me to lead because he's basically intel and data, and he hasn't done real field training or stuff like that since OCS. We had just seen the movie Aliens, before we deployed. It had come out in July of that year. And I'm thinking, sweet Jesus, this is effing Lieutenant Gorman right out of Aliens, and we are truly in a world of hurt. So, my guys aren't saying much because they're bracing against the wind and the spray, and we're in single file. Just a few curses here and there. And, I hear Pete saying, echoing what's in my head about we're probably all going to drown along with the druggies and how he wish he'd gone with the battalion to the PI. So Joe called him a slack-jawed wuss, and the rest of the boys laughed because boys will be boys. So anyway, listen, I told him, listen up. When we get down there, the LT is going to, link up with the locals, get the scoop, and try to coordinate some other help. So you guys are on me, and I told the driver that he was to hang back with the LT in case, like, druggies tried to run, etc. And he looked kind of grateful. So we reached where we needed to be, in short order, and we found 6 local cops, and a medic, the medic in there, and the unhurt fishermen. They had plenty of lights, and one had a halogen spotlight, which I was really grateful for because all we had was our crappy field flashlights that are kind of dull, and they're not supposed to be too bright. Okay, so at this point, it was time to open the gates of hell. So to get to the gist of the tale, we get to the coal locker, like I said, and it's inside of a stone building with a metal roof, which at least I'm happy about because it's one of the sturdier buildings along the docks, and probably because they were going to house, like the freeze and cold lockers and things like that, and there's, more environment control in that type of building. So, and we won't easily be crushed by a falling building if things, go south with the wind. And, the LT and the OMA start talking with the cops on site, and I can hear banging like the druggies are trying to break down the door, which is not possible when it's locked from the outside because it's very sturdy. I don't even think you could pump rounds through this thing. It was so damn thick. So my guys are chattering. I tell them to stow it and get their game faces on. And I give instructions to the cops, through the OMA who's translated, and I tell them, basically that when I say when, I want them to unlock the door, yank it wide open, and I want all their lights just going full noon on the 2 druggies inside, okay? And I want them to tell them to kneel, hands on heads, facing us, and not to move. And I confirm that they understand, and I deploy my guys. Sorry for the pause. I needed a drink. So anyway, now this is not like a breach and clear where we need to enter, tactically into a room. And so even though it's not the best plan, I have Pete and Joe to my right, and I have one kneeling, one standing. And I do the same with Morgan and Ring, to my left. And the only reason I did this is because, the druggies didn't have firearms. And speaking of weapons, the local cops, like I said before, only had like crappy 5-shot 38 revolvers and tonfas. Tonfas are that specialized billy club, etc. It's part of the whole martial arts thing. And not even all the cops have the 38. Some only have the tonfa. And 38 suck against druggies. The Marine Corps learned that in the Philippines in the insurrection, where there was drugged up rebels and set like that, and 38s were not putting them down, which is why the Marine Corps switched to the 1911 auto Colt that I was carrying at this point. And my simple plan was basically to have the druggies come out while we cover them and have the OMAs, subdue and cuff them. Okay, good plan, right? And that went to pieces as soon as the door was opened. The OMAs did their job, and they fling the door open and light the cold locker up like it's friggin' high noon. And the OMA that rode with us is about to shout, commands when he just freezes and time just stops. Okay, I can literally feel the confusion in the air. And Lieutenant Gorman, comes running up behind me saying, "I thought there were 2." Okay. Instead of 2 hopped up fishermen, there's 3 guys there, and one is the supposed dead cop. You can see his throat is ripped out though, and there's blood everywhere, and he just looks wrong. And their eyes are reflecting the light like a predator that you see in the dark. And now we're not here to kill anyone. We're supposed to be there on a rescue mission, for some guys who just got poisoned or whatever. By something that made them nuts. And, it's not their fault. And plus, at this point, I've never shot anyone. No one there had that I'm aware of. And I'd only been in one firefight in my life so far. And in that firefight, I didn't even know I was in one until it was halfway over. And that's a story for another time. Anyway, obviously, we knew these fishermen had killed 2 people. But I wasn't there to play, execution or judge and jury, etc. Not my pig, not my farm. We're going to subdue them, except, yeah, the plan was already blown, and then time sort of restarts. The cop, dead or alive, crossed the 20 feet between us in like a nanosecond, and or maybe I was frozen for an hour. I don't know. Either way, he tried to take my head off, and I'm pretty sure he bit my Kevlar helmet a few times while he was trying to yank my head off with the helmet. If he had wounded me, I wouldn't be here telling this story today. So, like an idiot, I hadn't had my weapon at the ready. It was in a combat sling. It's hanging, in front of me, and stuff. And basically, I had planned on helping the Omas, subdue the fishermen while my guys covered us. Okay. If I had thought to order my guys to fire, I'm not sure I had the time before that MFer was just on me. Okay. And Morgan stepped in, smashed the dead cop's face, staggering him back, and then just cross-checked him with his rifle like a hockey stick. And the bastard had my helmet in his hands, and my ears are ringing. I feel like a strap burn, and thank goodness the strap, I didn't have that tight because I'm lazy like that, because helmets sucked back then. They probably still do. Okay. I looked around, and I like taking the scene in like in a quick heartbeat. And one fisherman is attacking the Omas to my left, and 4 of them, and the 4 of them are using 2 riot shields that I guess they had the whole time. I just hadn't noticed them or something. And they're trying to, fend the guy off and push him back. And the other 2 Omas are trying to swing a club at him because, again, you're there to subdue them. Okay, so they're swinging those tonfas for all they're worth. And I guess they, to my right, Pete and Joe were trying to beat the other fishermen down while the other 2 Omas tried to help. And the Oma that had come with us, was shouting orders I couldn't understand, while our LT here was yelling that, they're dead. I think they're dead. And I'm like, yeah, they were dead. Okay. I don't know how else to say it. I don't know how else to explain it. And, you could just see it. Okay. You could smell that their bowels had released, at least in front of me when they died. Okay. Plus, the torn out throat. It's a big freaking hint right there. So, a quick glance at Morgan, and I could tell that he's thinking, what I was thinking, which is, heck yeah, fork yeah. And I yelled something like, put him down, as I shouldered my 16, and I just opened up on the dead cop. And I stitched his torso with 6 rounds, okay? And I know, Morgan hit him with around 6 or so from groin to shoulder. And, well, the Omas on the left had shoved the other dead guy back, and Ring was firing, trying not to hit them. And our driver and the LT stepped up, and they started firing as well. And Jesus, that driver was screaming the whole time, and I have no idea what was screaming. The Omas were screaming too. And the medic, he booked it, okay? He was the smart one. He booked it. He was gone, okay? Maybe he was going to get help or something like this. Now, we're taught to shoot center mass, okay? And we don't go for headshots. It's not a video game. It's not a freaking movie. And so, you don't go for headshots. But I started to fire again, and I jerked my 8th round and went right through the guy's forehead, and he dropped like a freaking sack of rocks or a puppet with the strings cut, okay? And so instantly I'm like, okay, headshot, I screamed. Shoot the head, whatever. And then the guy on my left went down, his head just obliterated, okay? And the last guy, well, Pete and Joe had emptied a magazine each into the guy. And for all I know, some of the Omas had shot him with 38s. But basically, they had destroyed the guy's chest, and severed the spinal column, which I guess cut off the brain. Now, we're finding this out later, and that guy was dead again, okay? So my ears are ringing, and, it's not like we were wearing ear protection or anything like that at this point. And we had just let loose in a concrete space that played like a metal concert on speakers that go to 11, if you know what I mean. So a couple of cops are throwing up, a couple of my guys too. I'm not going to say who, and I felt like puking myself, okay? So bloody freaking mess. And I remember the missing fisherman and had a moment of panic because, what the hell? There's a dead fisherman there. So I screamed about getting a light in there, and everyone kind of came to again. And the missing guy was still dead inside, all right? So he was lying near the weird metal box. The back of his neck had been bitten through, as we found out, and apparently it had gotten the spine, again, severing the spinal column from the head. So that's why he hadn't come back. Again, I don't know any of this right now. Okay, and none of this. I'm a freaking 19-year-old man. You know, what am I supposed to think? At this point, the only zombie movie I'd ever seen was Dawn of the Dead, and those were slow moving, shamblers or something like that. And it was, the premise didn't make any sense even, although it was fun. So the lieutenant at this point said the smartest thing I'd heard from him all night. He said, let's get the hell out of here. Touch nothing. So we shut the cold locker and we shut every door. The box is still in there with one of the corpses. And we left the other three just lying where they were and shut every door between there and the front. Okay. So there's a lot of things wrong with this scenario that we didn't think about at the moment. But unfortunately, our adventure wasn't over yet. So we're going to have to spend the night out here guarding a bunch of dead monsters in a mysterious box that might end up killing us all in the middle of a freaking typhoon. Okay. It was like one of the worst nights of my life for multiple reasons. Waiting for the typhoon to pass, wondering if we'd all drown and be swept along, away along with all the evidence, and and then wondering if we had been exposed to something at this point. It's not like we brought mop suits or contamination things or anything like that. So suffice it to say, we made it through the night, and sometime I'll go into what happened afterwards and tell you about the unit I joined, after this event that was basically formed in response to what had happened here. It was called Saru, okay? And I really think they did that because it sounds vaguely Japanese, and since this incident had happened on a Japanese island, blah, blah, blah. And get this, it stands for Supernatural Auxiliary Reaction Unit, the stupid name, okay? And it implies it's a support unit, by using the word auxiliary. And I guess technically it was a support unit, and it was placed under, the command of the Marine Corps, what's it called? Marine Corps Security Force Regiment, or MCFR. And it's the same command like the Marine Raider Regiment is under and what Fast Platoon is under. It just deals with more special ops, etc. type of thing. So now we all knew that this was going to be one of those top secret, national security, keep your stupid mouth shut or face jail deals. Okay. And personally, I thought it could be much worse than that. And I was a bit worried inside, although I kept it to myself. So whether you believe me or not, it's really up to you. But just, this is just the tip of the iceberg. But ask yourself this, okay? What kind of things do you believe in? Do you believe in Bigfoot? Do you believe in demons or aliens? Or whatever God you worship, okay? There's probably a wild tale that you believe that lots of other people don't believe. So again, it's really up to you whether you believe this or not, okay? And I'll follow up this and give you more details of what happened in the few days afterwards, but suffice it to say, this is the main part of the story that started everything I went through for the next 3 years, okay? Talk to you.